so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life? Well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the reflection and extension of you who will be here each Wednesday interviewing a different consciousness changemaker. And on the other 4 weekdays, leading the way to ensure that your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. Also, before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to take about a minute and a half to tell you about a few sponsors that not only help to make it possible to produce this show 5 days a week, but that I'm also genuinely passionate about promoting. The first longtime stellar supporter of the show that I want to mention is Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online with over 8,000 video titles. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. The second sponsor I'm sincerely passionate about promoting is Purium. It's no mystery that bringing your mind, body, and spirit into balance is necessary if a person truly intends to manifest the greatest and grandest version of themselves. So if you've been looking for a way to easily get organic superfoods into your system every day with a simple plan that can help you reestablish a healthier foundation and relationship with food, like I was doing before I found Purium, I highly recommend going to positivehead.com/transformation and checking out the videos and interviews there where I dive deeply into discussions explaining why I take these products every day. And should you ultimately end up on iShopPurium.com to purchase any of their 50 plus amazing superfood products, be sure to use the code POSITIVEHEAD, all one word, for a 25% discount. All right, all you positive heads, welcome, welcome. Here we go again. It is a terrific Tuesday here in the studio, and happy to say I'm not flying solo. I have David Krantz back here with me on the show to help steer the ship. David, welcome, my friend.
Hey, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here again. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I love it. I love it when I, have a soul share with someone. And for those of you who haven't heard, David was on episode 842 and does some epic work studying, genetics and looking at basically running like genotype reports on people and getting an idea of, what really jives with you, what you need to be more aware of, based off of your unique genotype. And he's actually, since that episode, I was so intrigued by, what it is that you do, David. You're gracious enough to offer to kind of take me through the whole process, and we did. We've just done that, and it was so cool. I wanted to bring you back on just to talk a little bit about what my report showed, and kind of just dive in a little bit more on this very, very fascinating topic, because this is something that's only been available. I mean, this is like a new science/art form, right? It hadn't been available for very long.
It absolutely is. I mean, we're really seeing the application of all of the science that has really only been available. The science really only started at about 15, 16, 17 years ago when we mapped the human genome. And so it's taken about 10 or 15 years to amass enough research and enough knowledge to really be able to start to apply it. And so what you got in that report when we went over it and looked at all of your genes that influence things like, what types of fats are right for your body and what amount of carbohydrates and, different micronutrients and things with your antioxidant pathways. All of that stuff, is only been available to even look at recently. So yeah, it's really exciting, and I'm super stoked that you appreciated what the info showed you and brought me back on to talk about it.
Yeah, it's just such a fascinating new topic. It kind of goes along with a lot of what we're doing on the show on a regular basis, is talking about the sort of expanding perspectives and understandings on the ultimate nature of reality and spirituality and all this philosophical type expansion, transformation, renaissance that's going on our planet. I feel like right now it's like people's blinders are sort of coming off and they're seeing so much more than they once did in regards to the ultimate nature of reality. Well, this is a reflection of that. Pertaining to physicality, right? And so that's what's so fascinating, because I always say, and it's one of the reasons I always am urging people to go check out positivehead.com/transformation, where I talk about, all the Purium products and why I'm so passionate about promoting them, because I use them every single day myself. And it's because, ultimately getting mind, body, and spirit are equally important, in alignment, and get your become the greatest and greatest version of yourself, getting all of those things. And it's easy for a lot of us who are really prone to going down the path of, philosophy and spirituality to get caught up in all the non-physical stuff. And, meanwhile, your body is your temple, right? And so it's a super important piece of the equation that I think sometimes can tend to get overlooked in our community anyway, so, it's really nice to have, to see exciting developments that are making it more intriguing and easier for people to have an understanding of their own biology.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate that attention to both sides. And when I say both sides, I mean, it's kind of a fallacy, because the separation between mind and body is essentially non-existent. We really now know from a lot of the research, looking at the relationship between the immune system and your mind, and what the balance is between those two things. And I'll tell you personally, the biggest breakthroughs for me on a personal development and psychological level came after I got my, mind and brain firing in a way that it wasn't before, through nutrition, through all of these different techniques that I'm going to be talking about in this masterclass that I'm going to be doing this weekend. And I was not able to have the mental capacity and clearance to really look at the parts of myself that, maybe were a little bit scary or uncomfortable, but actually having that energy and ability to focus and look at those things, because I started treating my body right, actually led to a lot of personal growth and spiritual development. Truthfully.
Yeah, that's funny, because a lot of when we first did like the 10-day transformations with a big group of P-heads back last spring, Purium transformation. One of the things that was brought to my attention by the people facilitating it, was how many people had sort of, once they started clearing out a lot of the noise, if you will, from bringing in, processed foods and things that were sort of lowering your vibration. That was sort of a byproduct that a lot of people didn't expect, was having like some profound openings and spiritual type experiences. And, it makes me think, I pulled up a quote here from Nikola Tesla. He said, "My brain is only a receiver. In the universe, there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. I have not penetrated into the secrets of this core, but I know that it exists." And it's like, here's a guy who's looked at as like maybe the smartest human to ever walk the earth by many. And it's like, my brain is only a receiver. Well, if I'm clogging up the channel, and I have brain fog because I'm not understanding my genetics or the fuel that I'm putting into my body is causing it to sputter, how am I going to receive that knowledge, strength, and inspiration, right? The clearest pathway to receiving it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. You want your receiver and your antenna to be in as good shape as possible. And, the interesting part to me, and this is where I get really fascinated with it, is that everyone's antenna and your physical structure requires a little bit of a different way to feed it and, nourish it. And so that's what I'm really focused on in terms of using your blueprint, right? Your underlying code to make it easier to figure out what those things are. And, I'm really excited to share that. And I think your listeners would probably really enjoy a lot of the information that I'm going to be sharing this weekend on this masterclass, both from kind of a general perspective of, what are the things you really need to know in 2019 to thrive, as well as how do you go deeper and personalize it. Because, speaking of Tesla, he created a lot of incredible technology. But we're in a sort of weird situation right now where our world is overrun by EMFs and pollution and toxins and things that, in order to really, take full advantage of the antenna and hardware that you have, you kind of got to be aware of how to manage some of that stuff. So that's a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is how to really, thrive this year in this particular environment where, it's very different from what your parents or grandparents were having to manage. So, and doing it from an empowered perspective, right? Because it's all about your mindset and the way you approach it. So, that's what I couldn't agree with that more.
Couldn't agree with that more. Why don't you, before we, and you're going to kind of give everyone a little glimpse into my genetics. Those of you who have been wondering if I'm an alien or not are going to find out some things here. So
it's
before we do that,
time.
Yeah, exactly. Disclosure came in a way you did not expect. So why don't you real quick, since you mentioned the masterclass, it's a free event you're doing this weekend. You want to go ahead and throw that out now, since you've mentioned it, for those who are ears perked up with that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to be doing a free masterclass online called Mastering the Art of Health in 2019. And it's going to be all about what are the things that you can do, the simple steps that you can take each day to create optimal functioning in your body and in your mind. And we'll be talking a little bit about how you can use genetics to really go deep and personalize all of this stuff for yourself. And the way that I've seen it show up and manifest working with a whole bunch of clients is that it's really, creating health is really more like creating art than anything. Of course, it's all based on science, but when you start to apply it to yourself, it's more about finding the techniques that are going to work for you, right? Like if you're learning how to paint, you need to learn how to hold the paintbrush and learn how to look at a color wheel and, maybe copy someone else's style for a little bit. But at a certain point, you have to refine your technique and really figure out what is going to work for you and what is going to allow you to express yourself fully. So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about is how do you practice your own art of health every day in a way that's efficient and easy and, doesn't take up a whole bunch of time. And, it allows you not to spend a whole bunch of time thinking about what you should be doing, rather just allows you to fit that into your routine and create positive, healthy rituals. So, we'll be talking about how to master your art of health this year.
That sounds so cool. I know a lot of people want to tune into that, and I'll just go ahead and throw it out now. For those of you who want to register for that, it's positivehead.com/2019 health. So 2019 and then the word health, all one word. And what you want to throw out the times that it begins and everything, David?
Yeah, so it's going to be this Sunday, the 20th at 5 p.m. Eastern. And I encourage everyone to try and make it then. We'll get a chance to actually interact and you can ask questions. And it's always a little more fun when we get to talk. But I will have a replay for those who are listening maybe after the fact that they can check out too.
Okay, cool. So that's Sunday, January 20th at 5 p.m. You said Eastern time, right?
Eastern time, yep.
So 2 Pacific. 3 Mountain, 4 Central, and all the other time zones out there. I'll let you figure that one out. Yeah, I like how you said that you're going to be going over rituals, because I really feel like ritual is such a, speaking about the spiritual work that, you know, we're so adamantly doing on this show, ritual is really a big part of that. I feel like you know, when you give energy to something, as Bashar, you know, one of my, you know, favorite teachers who, you know, claims to be a channel, who knows, but the information that comes through is really fascinating. He's very, very wise. And he talks about everything being a permission slip. You know, it's like we are these creator beings who are infinitely powerful. We're just reclaiming our power. And so we create permission slips that give us, okay, I've seen and heard enough to believe that I can heal myself now. You know, I've went through enough steps, you know, and so therefore I believe this is, you know, and ultimately it's the belief that's doing it all. You know, I think we'll get to the other side and see everything is placebo potentially, because we're such powerful creators. But, you know, so that's why I think ritual is such an important thing, because it allows for you to, it gives you a permission slip to kind of, you know, go through steps and a process to help to suspend disbelief enough to create belief and ultimately the result you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that perspective. And I love the quote unquote placebo effect, you know, in terms of leveraging the power of the mind. And exactly how you just said, like, if you can create structure for yourself day in and day out, that allows you to fully leverage that, take advantage of it, and put your mind in a place where it is going to create the best possible outcome because you have taken the time to do that. And, you know, if you've married it and matched it with what are these exact little things that your body needs, well, that's just an exponential recipe for success, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about the report that you've just been gracious enough, the genotype report you did for me, and some of the, you know, and guys, this is like detailed. What, you know, maybe you can explain what you do with this report. I know you explained it a little bit before in episode 842 when you were on, you know, for the Soul Share episode, and you guys, you know, of course, can go back and listen to that. But maybe a quick overview of what you do on this report, and then maybe we can talk about some of the things that were the most interesting or jumped out to you as, you know, unique or intriguing or interesting, you know, and in turn for me to really, you know, tune into and pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to hear, you know, what you found really impactful and relevant for you when we go through this. But
sure.
What I do with this is I take genetic information, your genetic information. You had your 23andMe done, so I took that and I used it. I also run tests through a private lab, but I can use those other companies as well. And I basically broke it down into these different categories in terms of looking at genes that we know are related to, say, how you metabolize and break down and absorb different nutrients. Things like carbohydrates and fats and proteins. And so I'm looking at the report we did right now, and
it's
this
like
is
50
broken
pages.
Yeah, this is a 50 page report. And this actually isn't the full thing, but it's pretty close. So there's 50 pages of information, and I will just kind of scroll through and give a little description. So the first piece here is the nutrition section. And the first page is looking at hunger and satiety. So these are hormones and neurotransmitters in the body that signal the brain when you're either hungry or feeling full. And we know, based on a whole bunch of peer-reviewed scientific studies, that certain genotype variants are more or less likely to experience hunger or maybe not feel as full when you eat, because of how these hormones are wired and how your brain is wired. So what I did is look through all those genes and gave you some recommendations and things that you might be able to do to kind of optimize how that shows up for you. You know, if you're someone who is, you know, craving food a lot or maybe not hungry, you know, this would be a very relevant section to you. And you actually had a very excellent high functioning set of genes here. So there wasn't too much to report, but you know, further on through the report, there's a section that looks at insulin resistance, sensitivity to dairy and gluten, and some other factors in grains, things that actually can create anxiety or agitation, maybe cause some poor sleep, that has to do with way certain chemicals and grains will interact with neurotransmitters, and your genes influence that. Some things that have to do with the way you perceive sweet and sugar, as well as, like I mentioned before, carbs, fats, different types of fats too. Things that look at saturated, polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, protein, and metabolism. And this one interesting section for you was the plant sterol section. So plant sterols are similar to cholesterols, right? They're a fat, and they're found in lots of different plants. And there's somewhat of a rare kind of situation where some people actually don't metabolize them as well. And it can actually cause higher triglycerides and, blood lipid markers that you don't want, maybe present more of a cardiovascular risk. So it turned out that you actually had some of the genes that can indicate that. And, it's pretty important to take a look at that through some blood testing, and then kind of, maybe modify your diet from there. But it's kind of a weird thing where, you wouldn't expect your, plant fats, right, to be an issue. Like, plants are usually very healthy, but there's a small percentage of the population that does actually have an increased risk of heart disease taking in high amounts of them, because it kind of messes up the cholesterol metabolism, kind of gets in the way there. So that was pretty interesting to fid. And
so
that's just the nutrition section.
You thought I should do then, based off of me having sort of a unique marker here, or genes that are turned on, going and doing a plant sterol test to kind of see, from that test, I'd be able to kind of see if it's actually causing any sort of a risk or issue in my body.
Right. Yeah. And there's certain things that from the genetics, you'll know right away, like, yes, you should definitely do that. And then with something like this, you want to get a little bit of more in-depth testing. This is kind of like a flag that gets raised. And then let's say, you want to look a little further into it.
Right. You gave me lots of insight on lots of things based off of going through this 50-page report. And you're saying in some cases, it's like, okay, there's something here that jumps out, go deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep, absolutely. And
cool.
What all the stuff I just mentioned was just in the first nutrition report. And then we also did the supplementation and micronutrient report together, and also the detoxification report.
Right.
I won't list everything out in there, but
yeah, it's a lot of stuff. Well, that's interesting. So, I don't really go to the doctor. I haven't been to the hospital really, since I was born. It's not something that I've really ever, I've told the story. Speaking of placebo, I've told the story since I was, a small child. I don't believe in getting sick. If someone has the flu, stay away from me. I have the flu. I'm like, oh, I don't believe in getting sick. And I'll, hug them or shake their hand or whatever. And my idea was, I was like, oh, okay, as I pronounce this and announce this more and more, it just is now they're agreeing with me. They're now believing it, helping me to co-create it. And it's really worked for me. Like, I've hardly been sick in my life, and, so, it's interesting you bringing this up. It's like, well, the one thing in my family has been, both on my mother's side, both my grandparents died of, heart disease, heart attack. So you bringing up this, unique plant sterol thing that could cause, issues there. It makes me think maybe I should go do blood testing with this.
Yeah, and when you match that mentality, which I love, by the way, I think that's the mentality to have, is to go through life believing that you're going to have the best possible outcome, because it just kind of opens things up and
permission slip.
Yeah, it's the permission slip. When you match that type of attitude and mentality with the right testing and doing a little bit of in-depth kind of analysis, that, that's the recipe for success. Because then you can, if you need to shift something in your diet or take a certain supplement, you can do it with this attitude that says, hey, I know that I'm doing the right thing for me. I'm going to make it work. And yeah, it's about developing the ritual and aligning with it.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the other things that maybe jumped out to you, just to give people, a little peek into my report that you found interesting, or maybe worth talking about.
Sure. So one of the really positive things, and so just to be clear, like, I don't always just find things you need to be careful of. Sometimes I find really cool things in here. One of the really cool things I found for you is you have this variant in what's called the Klotho gene, Klotho, that is associated with really high rates of longevity. It's really associated with people living longer. And so that's add that to your positive mentality list.
Yes.
That you have some, so you have some genes that are really, well associated with, living for a long time. And they've done a bunch of studies looking at this particular variant where, it's found maybe in about 15-20% of the population, but in people over 65, it's at a much higher percent. So people that live, to an older age tend to have higher levels of this protein. It's a protein that circulates around. And so that's pretty cool to know that you have that.
Yeah. And it makes sense. On my dad's side, his grandmother my great grandmother lived to be 99. And I know there's some Beechams in the low hundreds. So must come from that side of the family, most likely.
Mm-hmm. Another one of the kind of positive things to find was that you have the fast caffeine metabolism variant. And what that means is you have this, you have a higher amount of the liver enzyme that breaks down caffeine. And that's actually shown to be, when you drink more caffeine, actually cardioprotective. It actually prevents cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, that type of thing. So
good for my heart to drink caffeine with that, is what you're saying.
Good for your heart to drink caffeine. The optimal range tends to be about 1 to 2 cups, but you still get benefits from that, just not quite as much as the 1 to 2 cup range.
That's typically what I do as well. I usually have coffee there you go. Once, maybe twice a day.
But the opposite of that, like the variant that I have here, unfortunately, is the slow metabolism variant. So caffeine sticks around in my system a bit longer. And
are you really sensitive to it then? Like,
I'm not super sensitive, but I know that so I don't feel wired, but I will stay awake if I drink it anytime after, early morning. So yeah, it does kind of affect me like that.
Interesting. So that explains why I can drink it at 8 o'clock at night and go to bed a few hours later or whatever and not really have a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a factor there. And, for the people with the slow metabolism like me, I actually ended up switching to decaf when I found this out, because it does actually raise cardiovascular risk to drink lots of caffeine when you have the slow metabolism variant.
Interesting.
So it's
the opposite.
Yeah, it's pretty right. It's the opposite. And the studies on that are pretty good and pretty clear. So, that's something, if you're a coffee drinker, tea drinker, it might be worth looking into and being aware of.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool. So it's fascinating because then you can just kind of take this information and apply it. I know one of the things is we talked about the different fats that work well for me. And, speaking of caffeine, well, the time that I typically have it is I make bulletproof coffee in the morning. So many of you probably know it's, you use this particular oil, MCT oil, which comes from coconut oil, combined with, grass-fed ghee or butter. And in my case, I'll put a few other things in there like cocoa and cinnamon and stevia. But it gives you this, really turns your brain on, and without a crash from caffeine, and just it definitely works really, really well for me. And you had mentioned to me that you made a great point as we went through my chart, and now because of it, I've adjusted the recipe. You were like, okay, and I forget the names. The fat from the MCT oil, or brain octane oil that I use, it's like really good for me. The fat that's coming from the ghee, not so much. So I scaled back how much of that I'm putting in, and upped the MCT oil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I find that the fat balance is maybe the single most thing that you can do to get right that will change weight loss, response, energy levels, all of those things. Because you really see a big difference in the way that people break these things down and use them. So sometimes, I'll see people that they really shouldn't be having any ghee at all, and other people that it actually works great, and, they're good, they're well suited for the keto diet. I think you were more kind of on the balanced side of things overall there. But yeah, the fat balance is huge.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. Have you seen with this, and I know this, this hasn't even been a thing that's been doable for very long, but I'm curious how epigenetics plays into this, and turning genes off and on by changing habits, working out, changing beliefs, as Dr. Bruce Lipton, Biology of Belief author, talked about in detail on the episode when he was on this podcast a while back. And have you ever went and done someone's chart and report, and then come back a few years later and they've made a lot of changes in their life and belief system and activity, and now you see different genes that have turned on, that were maybe off or on, that kind of thing, or vice versa?
Well, I'll tell you, almost all of the recommendations that I gave you are operating on an epigenetic level. So based on, your base genetic code, we know that there's going to be different epigenetic responses based on what you do. So essentially all of the things that I have in that report are based on epigenetics and looking at how to shift genetic expression towards the more optimal range. So say, for example, with that caffeine gene, there are a few things that you can do to say, if I had the slow metabolism, there's a few things that you can do to epigenetically change the function of that gene a little bit. It's not super strong on that one, but to give you an idea, a lot of especially the genes in the antioxidant section, like those genes, you can turn them on and off with different herbs real quickly. And so, for example, one of the things I recommended for you for some of the mitochondrial genes was holy basil. And we know that holy basil has a pretty strong epigenetic effect on these particular genes. And I really do look forward to the day where we can just go get the epigenetics tested. But we're not quite there yet in terms of what the available tests are.
Gotcha.
That is coming probably, maybe 5 years down the road. To have that as something that you could order outside of a research climate, or a research institution. But we do see it in, I definitely do see it in people's experience and the way that people change their brain function, lose weight, have more energy, that type of thing. You can understand that there are epigenetic changes happening.
Right. Yeah, just to refresh me on that, it's a great example, the holy basil. So what was what were your recommendations to me based off of that? Because we actually went through this report a week or so ago and trying to remember, and it was a lot of information. Because that's the thing, guys. If you were to ever order a report from David, he runs the report, shares the report, this 50-page report with you, and then he goes through it in detail. And each section has recommendations based off of his findings, and so it's pretty cool. What just to give an example to everyone, what was your recommendation like? If I were to start taking holy basil, what would that affect again?
Yeah, so that would affect this gene called NQO1, and it's an antioxidant that your mitochondria make. And your mitochondria produce all the energy for the rest of your body. And if you think about a power plant, right, like any type of power plant, it's kind of a messy process. Like inherently, there's going to be a little bit of pollution. I mean, solar is our best bet, but even at the very smallest level, there's still a little bit of, damage over time that the sun is going to do to the voltaic cells, right? So any type of that energy production, there's things that sort of need to be taken care of. And this particular antioxidant, the NQO1 gene makes, is really important for keeping that process efficient and preventing any damage to the rest of your cells in your body. Rest of the organelles in your cells. And we know that this particular gene variant you had in the NQO1 gene is a little bit less efficient at that. So holy basil is one of the things that will turn on that NQO1 enzyme and that antioxidant system to function a little bit better. And it kind of supports it, boosts it. And, it's nice because it's very targeted. We know that it's going to affect that particular gene epigenetically. And, that's kind of what I, recommended the holy basil for there.
Very cool. Very, very cool. So Yeah, there's a lot of recommendations in there to sort of consider. One of the things that comes to mind, and I'm just curious on your opinion on it, because you talked about the plant sterols, or some of the plant fats that could be, it's kind of rare, but could be not good for me based off of my genetics. Does this have anything to do with, I've been hearing something recently about certain plant protein lectins that can be bad, and could that be related in any way? I mean, what are your thoughts, or do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and that is definitely a really hot area in certain circles right now. And the sterol piece is a whole different compound in plants, so it's not really related to that. Okay, but when you bring up lectins, I'm pretty interested in that, because I think it's a missing piece in a lot of people's health puzzle. There is a really excellent book on it called The Plant Paradox. And it seems to be really relevant, more so for people with any kind of autoimmune condition, where these lectins in plants, which to some degree are kind of plant defense molecules, plants need to defend themselves from all kinds of animals. So, they evolve these things over time that when a certain animal eat it, it might disagree with them, and they get sick and they leave the plant alone. Right. And so humans, we're super adaptable. We have, for the most part, figured out how to prepare those foods and eat them. And, a lot of the lectin containing plants that are of concern are plants that were in North America that people from European ancestry never really saw until maybe 500-600 years ago. So our systems are a little bit less prepared to handle that. And then when you kind of factor in, some of the other competing environmental problems, things like toxins, glyphosate, things like that, it kind of exacerbates that inability to process those things well, right? And it seems that, people that have an autoimmune condition, the lectins in certain cases seem to kind of continue to trigger that immune process. And so there's a doctor named Stephen Gundry who's done a bunch of work on it, and he's found that putting people on a low lectin diet, or no lectin diet, really, it has to pretty much be none or not at all. He's seen some really good results with reversing some of that stuff. And that's something that I'll work with a couple, some of my clients on. And there are some genes that can help kind of pinpoint whether that might be an issue or not. Interesting. And interestingly, one of those main genes is actually in the cannabinoid 1 receptor, which is surprisingly also responsible for receiving THC and some of the psychoactive effects that you get. Totally different action, but some variations in the same gene that seem to be related to lectin sensitivity.
Yeah, and I think, doesn't Dr. Gundry even have a lectin blocker product? I feel like I saw something that you can take that helps to block them.
Yeah, I think he does. I know sialic acid, and there's a few other things that that are known to kind of block them and deal with that. The one thing that and I'll tell you, my partner, she has, since she was very little, had a innate gag response to beans and squash. Oh, wow. And she can't eat beans and squash. Very young age, just knew she couldn't eat it. And at a certain point, her parents stopped trying to get her to eat it because she just wouldn't. And she would get sick. And beans and squash and that whole family of eggplant, squash, the kind of the nightshade family, tomatoes, those are very high in lectins. And she does have some of the genetic markers that are related to that. And so when I see a client or meet someone who tells me, well, I don't like squash, it kind of sends up the flag for me a little bit.
Interesting. Yeah, because, when you say autoimmune, one of the things, and you and I discussed, for me, that's been the most, my health has been just absolutely amazing. But one of the things that's been an issue that's sort of gotten worse in recent years is I don't know if it's eczema or just red patchiness, and it's, across my nose a little bit and now a little bit on my forehead. And so it's one thing that I'm really trying to figure out. Okay, I know this is, this is autoimmune related, right? I mean, it's inflammation for some reason. So I'm curious if, from looking at mine, if you think that would be something that looking at my genetics, if you think that would be something for me to consider trying as I sort of, explore how to get to the root of this. If, the lectins, cutting out lectins or blocking lectins would be, a good thing to explore for me.
Yeah, I think it's always worth an experiment with stuff like that. For you, let's see, I'm looking at this gene. So yeah, you actually don't have that particular genetic variant. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're not sensitive to them, but it also wouldn't be the first thing that I try. Gotcha. And the thing about lectins is in terms of the gut and immune relationship, right? We know that gut health is really important for managing skin conditions because it's important to the immune system to not have any extra food coming through the tight gap junctions of the gut that it's supposed to keep your food where it's supposed to be. And the lectins actually tend to disrupt that for certain people a bit more. Right. And just so you're aware, gluten is a lectin. And so sometimes people will try a gluten-free diet and not have any, positive response from it, but they're still eating nightshades. They're still eating other grains that have lectins in them. And then when they try that, sometimes that works.
Interesting. I eat a lot of tomatoes. So, that definitely, and I've tried gluten. I did try kind of gluten-free for a few weeks and it, I don't know if it was a long enough trial, but it didn't really affect anything that I noticed. But definitely was eating tomatoes during that time period, I'm sure. So, the other thing, that you do as part of a report and a separate report is looking at, CBD, THC, and of course that's a big thing for a lot of people, right? CBD has really become such an important, supplement for a lot of people to help with all kinds of things. And now THC is being legalized everywhere. So I thought that was really interesting and gave me a lot of insight into my own relationship with the THC over the years. As I explained to you, when I was younger, I liked it a lot. And then it sort of seemed to change for me over time where I still partake every now and then, but I can tend to have I'm someone who's very comfortable in my skin and not a lot of stress or, paranoia or anything like that in my daily life too much. But when I take THC, I notice sometimes I can be a little bit more uncomfortable or have anxious thoughts, which, and you were, what was really fascinating when we went through, my report with that was, actually you can identify people and then you have people on the other side who it's it completely seems to make them normal, right? And this idea of oh my gosh, you're in the best state ever. And how does everyone not want to smoke weed every day? And what's interesting is it's different genetics that have this different effect, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you had a couple of the variants in this gene called the AKT1 gene that has been studied to be associated with more of a paranoia and kind of overwhelming response to THC. And that was kind of the one major thing that stood out that I thought maybe accounted for some of that.
Right.
And this is sort of a personal pet area of research of mine in terms of the endocannabinoid system. Because I've been a fan of the cannabis plant for, many years. And when I realized there was, a good body of research out there, I got really into it. And, as far as I know, the panel that I've put together is the most comprehensive one out there looking at this type of information. So I'm able to look at things like THC metabolism, how you break down THC and, can also give you insight if you're someone who responds really strongly to THC. This might, give you some clues as to why, as well as CBD metabolism. You might need a higher dose, lower dose. And, it's a good guide. It's not necessarily going to tell you exactly what dose you should do, but it will give you a range to say, you're more likely to break it down really fast. So you might need more of a dose. And, it looks at some other stuff like cognitive function, too, because as much as I love cannabis, I don't smoke it all the time anymore because I know that I will forget my keys or, wherever I put them. Right. And and when I look at my own genes related to that, it makes sense. Like I have a lot of the variants that are associated with a little bit worse cognitive function and memory after smoking. And, that's one of the most interesting parts to me to do this report for people, because I've done it for a few very, very high functioning stoners that are running businesses and smoking every day. And they just use it as a way to focus, and it really helps them. And then when I look at the genes, oftentimes that is pretty well correlated with what the research says. So, it's pretty powerful stuff. And the other piece that's very powerful too is being able to look at potentially negative responses, like some of the paranoia and things like that, or even in some cases worse conditions, things like having a weird kind of acute kind of schizotypal or psychotic response. Very rare, but it does happen.
Right.
And there's some good genes that have been studied and correlated with that. So it's something that if you're a parent and your kids are smoking weed and you want to know, like, hey, is this something that, I should really, not let them do, or
be concerned about.
It's not be concerned about. And it's not necessarily like letting them do it, but it's more about informing people, at the right age to say like, hey, this is something that is either gonna, potentially cause problems for you in the long run or not. And like I said, like it's pretty rare, but it's worth looking at.
Yeah.
Especially as it becomes more available.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what a healthy way to approach it as a parent is like, okay, well, let's really look at this. I know you're going to be exposed to it, especially in a world where it's becoming, sort of as easily accessible as alcohol. Right. So instead of like, having a metered response, maybe based off of the science of your child's, or teenager or whatever, young adults, genetic makeup, seems like quite the more healthy approach than maybe I think back to my parents at that age. It's like if at 16 I told my mom I was smoking weed, she would probably call 911, and it's like I don't know if it's like. She probably would picture me like shooting it up with Satan there, helping to pull the strap around my arm, and it's like as I'm like maybe killing someone, who knows? So yeah, I think a more healthy and mature and metered approach to understanding, these things and how they're going to affect us and our family members seems to make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think at the end of the day, it's about empowering yourself with the right information that's going to let you make healthier choices and, make those healthy choices easier for yourself, because there's less to think about, right? Like you have so many decisions to make throughout the day. Like eventually you kind of got to pick and choose what you're going to, put your willpower towards.
Yep.
And if you kind of know like, okay, I just have these things that I do as a ritual, or I know this stuff about myself, I don't have to like constantly experiment, think about it and wonder. It just takes a lot of mental energy away from that type of stuff that you can use for other really cool things like, making art or hanging out with your friends or building a business or doing whatever you're doing,
Yeah. Right. Well, this has been very, very cool, David. Thank you so much for taking the time. Like I said, after, our last Soul Share a month or so ago, I was so intrigued and I so appreciate you taking the time to go and run my reports, these full reports. And, for those of you guys, once again, who are interested in this masterclass coming up on the 20th, here in just a few days from now, you can go to, once again, positivehead.com/2019 health, and that'll take you to the registration page, where you can kind of dive deep with David as well. And anything else that you want to add here as we wind down?
Well, if people want to get in touch with me directly, they can go to david-krantz.com/positivehead, and I've got a contact form set up there. But I'd also encourage people to go first to your website, to the 2019 health link, and sign up for the masterclass. And I'm really excited to share, all this information with you. It's kind of the sum total of the most important things that I've learned and use with my clients. And, I've kind of made it, I'm not too big on New Year's resolutions, but I have sort of made one to try and just share this information with as many people as I can. So, I really appreciate you having me on and talking about it and helping the positive heads out there become healthier and happier and more aligned with who they're really meant to be.
Love that. I love that. Yeah. If I recall, if you guys go to david-krantz.com/positive head and just want a direct consult, right? Isn't that what you offered to do on our Soul Share? And so I thought that was really cool and gracious of you to offer to, do a free consult with people and anyone who's interested, who just knows like, hey, I definitely am interested in having this genetic report done for myself. So, or just want to learn more, about the process and cost and all that sort of stuff. So, awesome. David, thank you so much, my friend. This has been so cool. And, I'm sure a lot of people will be wanting to come into the masterclass, and I'm going to check out my calendar to see if I can make it, because I know it will, there's going to, what you're doing, I think is like just amazing. It's like the cutting edge of science really, and health and wellness. And it's just a very, very cool path you've chosen to go down. And I appreciate you doing so.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I imagine it might be like a lot of your listeners feel, where it's sort of like the path chose me a bit more than me choosing the path.
Right.
So, happy to be sharing it with everyone. So thank you again.
Yeah. Well, you got chosen by a cool path. So congrats on that. And,
hey, so did you.
Yeah, it's all, you know what? We all, I think, anyone listening to this, who's tuning into this vibration, this offering energetically, it's like we're all beings who I think have done a lot of the hard work in many of our past lives. And this goes down a whole nother conversation, which I won't take us down. But I believe, we've all, anyone listening to this, it's like you've paid a certain number of dues, and you're at a point where your life is really meant to be like more fun and exciting. And of course, it's always going to tie back into serving others in some way. I believe is always going to be, the highest form of excitement and joy that you'll find. And so it's cool to just see, as I connect with other people resonating so closely, to see what their unique gift and offering is to the world. And so hopefully you guys have been inspired by David and his work, and we'll check out his masterclass and connect with him. And otherwise, once again, David, thank you so much, my friend. And until next time, all of you journey well. Love you so, so much. Before we sign off, I wanted to let you all know that we have finally created the Game with the Universe on our website, where you can choose the first number that comes to your mind, and it'll pull up that episode number of the podcast. I've been saying this is a great way to co-create synchronicity and magic with your higher self for quite some time by doing this manually. But now if you go to positivehead.com/YO universe, there is a super fun and simple interface to play this game with your higher self. I firmly believe just by setting the intention to play in this way, it opens up the door for magic, and it's a synchronistic way to hone in on nuggets of wisdom out of the huge catalog of episodes that are specifically appropriate for you at this time in your journey to becoming the next greatest and grandest version of yourself. And it also makes for a super fun way to engage and invite friends, family, people on social media to check out the podcast as well. So be sure to check out positivehead.com/YOUNIVERSE, and be sure to tell all your friends so they can play a game with the universe, which also helps the show to reach new people, which I greatly appreciate. And as a quick reminder, be sure to also check out positivehead.com/transformation if you're curious to learn more about Purium superfoods and why I take them every day. On this journey of becoming the next greatest and grandest version of ourselves that we have all embarked upon, I can't stress the importance of managing your physical vibration enough. And quite honestly, Purium has put together the simplest plan I've found to do so, and I'm sincerely excited to share it with all of you. Lastly, if you're craving more consciousness elevating content, be sure to check out Gaia, which is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web, where you can stream an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. As you all hear me constantly say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to journey deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out.